here at the UK Scientific Wrestling 3-day camp with Jake Shannon. Jake is the founder of Scientific Wrestling. And firstly, welcome to the UK.
Thank you, Oz.
Thank you for coming. Tell us about Scientific Wrestling. What is it, and why did you found it?
Well, so it's quite interesting. I think I started in 2003, so it's been going for almost 15 years now. Not quite, 14, 13 years. But, I've been a lifelong wrestler. I started when I was 4 and dabbled in different martial arts from judo to taekwondo and whatnot. And I kind of was lost because I was a wrestler, but they weren't doing submissions, and I was very fascinated with the early UFC. I was fortunate to attend the second UFC in Denver, where I was going to university. So very early on I was into it, and then I got involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because that was the thing, and it just didn't quite feel like home. I mean, I have a lot of respect for it, but it just wasn't right for me. And then I dabbled in pro wrestling for a while. I put on a bunch of weight, and I actually got booked to do some, in the United States, there's a big tour called the Vans Warped Tour, and I got booked on that. And I was kind of lost. I just was doing my own thing, and a gentleman by the name of Sakuraba came around and was an anomaly. He did what seemed impossible because it just, at that time, the dogma was just jiu-jitsu was the thing, and it was, this was not a lark. It was based on what people were seeing in competition, and it was, if you didn't do jiu-jitsu, you were going to get killed, and so it's just such a dominant paradigm, and to have Sakuraba come in and just shatter it like glass so effectively, just Gracie after Gracie, I had to know what he was doing. Sure. Now, fortunately, I have a master's degree in financial mathematics, and so I was good at research. And so I started looking around, what is this guy doing? This is not just unorthodox, he's actually doing something systematically. And that led me to this sport of catch as catch can. And that kind of opened a whole floodgates for me because as a pro wrestler, it gave me some history that I could look back on and had some legitimacy in fighting. In the modern day, it was relevant because Sakuraba was really cutting through the Gracie family like a hot knife through butter. And so it was very exciting, and I leveraged my researching ability again to find who can I learn from, because there was literally nobody. I mean, very rarely, you'd have to travel to Japan maybe, and you could find somebody to learn from, but where I was at in the States, it just wasn't going to happen. Long story short, I ended up befriending a legendary fellow by the name of Karl Gotch.
Yep.
And he doesn't suffer fools lightly, and so I was very fortunate that either I fooled him or something, and he was very kind to me, and we became very good friends, and he really helped me. He introduced me to some people like Yoshiaki Fujiwara, who's a big trainer and a wrestler and fighter out of Japan, and that eventually led to me knowing Josh Barnett.
Sure. And
Josh, we actually kind of did an exchange, I suppose. I think I benefited far more. I introduced Josh and Karl so they could become friends because I knew Josh was as passionate or more than I am. And he introduced me to Billy Robinson.
Right.
And I don't know what it was, but Billy and I really, really hit it off. And we formed this partnership, and from that time on, this was probably around 2007. So from 2003 to 2007, I had the company and we were doing things, but it really hadn't taken off. I'd done some seminars I'd actually done seminars with Wade back then. Yeah. I'd done some with Mark Schultz. I'd done some with Fujiwara, another catch wrestler that's an American named Dick Cardinal. But it really hadn't taken off. And Billy really saw the vision that I had. We had a very similar idea about things, and man, we just ran with it. And so we started touring, making available. I figured that I couldn't be the only person that was aching for this kind of knowledge. I knew that there had to be other people, even if there weren't like masses of them, that there had to be people who were as serious as I was. So I opened up this idea of training as many people in the sport as we could possibly do on our shoestring budget. And it's really turned into something quite nice. And I think it was 2011 was the first time that we were able to come over here to the UK, to the land where Catch As Catch Can was first documented and really blossomed here.
So
How did that was
happen?
it, like in a nutshell.
So, because I was chatting to somebody the other day. They were asking me about where they can learn catch, and I realised that there were quite a lot of people doing it now. Whereas a little while ago there was no one at all, and all I knew of Catch As Catch Can were some old books that I managed to get hold of, and it was you bringing Billy over that got me involved. How did you get to the point where you, an American ex-pro wrestler, was bringing an English legendary wrestler over to teach English wrestling in England when nobody in England was doing it? How did that happen?
Well, it was very interesting because, Billy had really wanted to come back here. So for people who don't know, he passed away a couple years ago. And, he had always been like, we'd been touring the United States and having these seminars and some modest success. And he just, Jake, how can we get over there? And I said, well, we'll figure this out. And I just kept trying and pinging people. And eventually, one of the people on my list, people would send me emails and various messages saying, oh, can you come over? And, Karl would always say, talk is cheap, but money buys whiskey. And nobody actually got us over. Well, one of the people did. His name's Andy Crittenden, and he's up in the Midlands, up in Doncaster. And so for the first...
He'll hate you for saying that.
Why?
Because he's from Yorkshire, and that's definitely in the north. That's not the Midlands.
Oh, it's north, though. I don't know all your...
From now on, he can be Andy from the Midlands.
Sorry, Andy. But Andy was very instrumental in bringing us over, and he's... I think he has a lot more expertise in like kickboxing, and he was already familiar with bringing over talent like Joe Louis and these other American kickboxers. So when the opportunity came for him to bring Billy, I think he understood the importance of it as well.
Sure.
And somehow we all were able to make it happen that first year, and it was quite a wonderful time. And so we were able to come back and make that kind of an annual thing. Billy passed away a few years ago. I think he was, I can't remember how old he was, but he was at least 75. It's just slipping my mind how old he was when he passed. He was 74, 75. And just, to be candid, I almost didn't continue because I was quite close to him. He was very close to our family. I named my youngest child after him and such, and it was just difficult. But cosmically, or whatever you want to call it, a month before Billy had passed, Wade had contacted me, and we're friends going back a while, and we had worked together and done seminars and things, and Wade had contacted me. He said, I want to get doing that stuff again, let's do something. And I said, okay, but I've got something with Billy going, and I just didn't know how to make it. And then when Billy passed, and I had my kind of, heart to heart, I had to really, my wife and I really talked about it. I almost didn't continue, but I'm glad that I did. And Wade, for me, one of my passions, just as a human being in a broad number of subjects, is to bring esoteric subjects to a wider audience. I really enjoy unearthing these little gems and sharing them with other people. That's something that I really enjoy. And Wade fits the bill. Now, if you're a wrestler of any kind, he's not. You know who Wade Schaus is because he's like the greatest wrestler ever. But in this mixed martial arts environment, nobody knew who he was. And his accomplishments in wrestling, and in particular pinning, which is relevant to Catch As Catch Can, right? Catch As Catch Can and mixed martial arts are very similar. It's just that with mixed martial arts, you win with a knockout or a submission. Catch As Catch Can, it's a pin or a submission. So everybody knew, and so Wade is very relevant for catch wrestling with pinning, but nobody knew that he was an All-American in like 7 different combat sport disciplines, from judo and sambo and Greco-Roman and all this. So he really brings a lot to the table. So it's been exciting to help turn people on to this incredible sport. But I really have to say, you know, it really was, Andy was very instrumental in bringing Billy back here. And it was great because we were able to tour, and he'd show us all these great things, you know, like, because Billy was also quite a scholar for being an athlete and being, you know, a professional wrestler. And he was a very bright guy and very into history. And so it was very nice to come back with him as a tour guide. Although I will say this, and I know he's watching over us, so I'm hoping I don't get a crossface or a toe hold in my sleep somehow from the ghost of Billy. But the guy was larger than life. I mean, when we brought him over here, I think he was quite excited, and the guy could party. He out-partied me, and you know, he was twice my age. I couldn't keep up with him, so he just was a great guy.
So where next? I mean, obviously we've got this almost this resurgence of catch as catch can wrestling from you bringing people like Billy over and getting it going, and the people that had experience of it in the UK have kind of seen that there's a demand for it and started doing it again themselves. What's the next stage? Because obviously you go along to an MMA gym and they all do striking, they do boxing, they do Muay Thai, they do kickboxing, they do BJJ, they do no-gi, and every now and again you find someone that does catch wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, why is it that, you know, globally in MMA wrestling is such a vital part, but so here in the UK people kind of don't really know anything about it? How does that going to change?
Yeah, it's ironic because actually that first year Billy and I came over, we're in the cab ride going actually to Chris Crossan's gym, and we're on the way, and it's a long drive, so the cab driver asks us, you know, oh, what are you here for? And we tell him martial arts. He's like, oh, I'm a martial artist. He tells me everything about Jeet Kune Do and all this other stuff and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we mentioned catch wrestling, and this guy is literally an hour from Wigan, and he never had heard of it. And both Billy and I were just so flabbergasted that nobody had heard of it. So, you know, what we're really trying to do, and you mentioned all these people popping up doing it now, and that is kind of what my vision in software. There's this idea called open source software where you don't really take ownership of it. You just try to make this software better, and anybody can have access and do it. And that's been my real approach. So in some ways, you know, I know people like look at me strangely from a business perspective, like you're creating your own competition with all these. Well, to be honest, 99% of the people springing up are not competition. We're all working together. And so I mentioned Chris Crossan, for example. I mean, you're working with him with Legit Pro Wrestling.
Absolutely.
He's doing these events, and that's my way of actually getting to your question. I think what we have to do is really look at it as a sport. And we have to present it as a sport. And we have to do it, in my opinion, personally, I started tournaments in the United States in 2007. I was the first person to really bring back competitive catch wrestling in the 20th century. And, well, in the 21st century as well. But there really hadn't been any competitive stuff since the early 20th century. I think that it's going to be competition, and I prefer an open tournament format where anybody can come in, but even invitationals and things like that. So I think shows, having people participate, but also having the local gyms, whether it's jiu-jitsu, judo, MMA, anybody that's doing wrestling, you need to actually do the rules, and they're very simple. There's subtle variations. Some people have different variations of the rules, but the rules are simple. Again, you win with a pin or submission, and they need to start actually rolling like that in their gyms. They have to actually throw the pin in. And I think that's the biggest pushback that we've gotten from like grappling or no-gi oriented gyms, is they just don't want to do the pin. But I think if you throw the pin in as well as the submissions, it's a very exciting sport. And people try to go to see these jiu-jitsu or judo tournaments, and they're snooze fests unless you know judo and then you're interested. But the audience is bored. Catch wrestling is quite exciting even for participants because it's simple. Yep. It's like MMA. It's pin or submission is the win. And so I think that will be the key. I think the key will be when we get people competing at a high level.
So how do people find out more? People want to get involved in catch wrestling now. You know, it's growing. You've created a bit of a buzz, and year on year it's growing. This camp's the biggest one I've ever done. It's my fourth. How do people get involved?
Well, of course, they can just go to our website, which is scientificwrestling.com. But they can contact people like you.
Yep.
So here at Premier MMA, they can contact Chris Ferran, Chris Crossan up north. There's a number of people, but I think the best thing, if you go to scientificwrestling.com, send me an email. It's training at Scientific Wrestling. Depending where you're at, I can probably put you in touch with somebody that's relatively close, and you guys can get together and figure it out.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jake.
Hey, thank you.